Hello and welcome to the Melbourne AWS User Group podcast. This is episode 1 of season 2. Yes, we've decided to create a new season because we had such a long time in between episodes that this way it seems like we planned it. So, obviously this episode, as you probably saw on the title, we'll be discussing reInvent 2022. And to do that, I have with me two wonderful people. As Jason Wood.
Hello.
And Matt Merrill.
Hello.
So we got called wonderful, Matt. That's awesome.
Yeah, I was sort of sitting here going, I'm sorry, there are more people? I'm sorry, because it can't be us. It can't be.
So now we will introduce the actual wonderful people. So, reInvent 2022. None of us were lucky enough to actually attend it in person, but we still have opinions. Probably soberer opinions than if we were there.
Yep. I'd agree with that.
So let's just begin and discuss about the event itself. Was it a good reInvent? A boring one? How was the virtual experience? Who wants to start?
I'll take that one. So look, as someone who gets up at 3:30 in the morning on a normal day, the keynote's perfectly timed for me. They start the moment I get up. You give them 5 minutes to get going, and it works really well. I have to say the online experience this year was actually pretty good, and is probably the first time that I haven't really suffered any sort of buffering or any jitter type issues, which was really nice to see. As for the keynotes themselves, look, I think they were really good. The opening keynote, as always, we heard from a couple of customers, sort of get their perspective. I don't know if it didn't translate well into the stream version, but did anybody else find those intermittent videos where they sort of, played a cut scene on the screens for like 10 seconds? A little jarring. He'd sort of get up and start talking about and sort of say, "Oh, we're going to talk about this," and then he'd have a cut scene of an ocean for literally 10 seconds, and he's just going off stage to grab a drink of water or whatever for 10 seconds, and then he comes straight back on, and it's like just long enough for me to think that something was about to happen, but then too short for me to actually go, was that actually necessary?
Yeah. Honestly, I didn't really notice when I was watching. I wasn't watching them live. I watched on mine on playback. So mostly I was doing something else and listening, and then I'd look around if they were talking about something interesting. I didn't really notice it.
Yeah, it could just be a me thing.
Yeah, actually, on a slight aside from that, one thing that I did like when I was looking at the YouTube versions was if you went into the more info bits, they had all the different sections mapped out and chapterized, so you can just click on any bit that interests you and jump to there. So that was quite a nice experience for the post live viewing.
That is good. Yeah, and they were also pretty quick again with starting to get the videos up.
Yeah, that was nice. But also too, I did have one friend, I think it was probably her first reInvent that she went to live, and was sort of posting up and posted a pic of the pre-talk band, saying like, "Hey, look at this! The pre-entertainment is much better than most conferences' main events." Just goes to show sort of the scale that you have at reInvent, and I know she was pretty impressed just with the first one. So I think that was before Andrew's keynote. So yeah, it was sort of all posting up like, "Hey, how cool is this?" And it's only the warm up.
You don't realize just how big an event it is until you actually go.
Oh yeah,
and just how many people are in the audience, and just what a mammoth logistical effort the whole thing is. I won't lie, my feet are very happy I didn't go in person. Being able to sit at your computer and watch them, as opposed to doing I think I average 110 kilometers the week of reInvent normally. So yeah, feet happy, shoes happy, not having to spend 30-something hours on a plane happy. But yeah, there is a small part of me that you do miss the, let's call it atmosphere.
Yeah, I mean, just for if you haven't been, like, just the whole networking and so the hallway sessions and catch-ups is, the amount that you get done outside of the sessions, it's just amazing. And then, when you're there, the things that you won't see, the chalkboard sessions and, those sorts of things are, just amazing. Really, can get as in depth as you want.
Yeah.
And then, I think one of the other things that, always needs to be mentioned at a reInvent, the start of Werner's keynote. Those are always awesome. And yeah, I just love the mini movie from this one.
I have to admit, his keynotes always, I always really enjoy his keynotes. He's got a very interesting perspective on technology and where things are going. So I always find his keynotes very informative, and I have to admit, and we'll get into the announcements in a little bit, but he usually has the fun, interesting announcements that tickle the engineering part of my brain.
Definitely.
Yeah, but it's not even just the announcements that make his keynote so interesting. It's, as you say, his insights into what's going on.
Yes.
Yeah, most definitely.
Absolutely. Without a shadow of a doubt. Yeah. So, keynote's good. Video's good. It's the age-old thing. If you go to reInvent, you don't attend the sessions because, let's face it, they're all going to be up on YouTube. And, as you mentioned, they're getting very quick at getting the sessions up on YouTube after the fact, which is really nice to see. When I do go, it's usually the plane ride home worth of, watching sessions. So it's like all the training and none of the cost.
Yeah. How did you two find the announcements? A lot, not a lot, okay, interesting, boring?
I would say interesting. I mean, I think one of the things that was very interesting was the amount of pre-invent announcements that came out that were awesome. I mean, we're usually used to, the trickle when it comes up, you get heaps of announcements, each day during the year, and then reInvent comes up and, there's maybe only a small number come through, and there are a lot of really cool, like, pre-invent announcements as well this year, along with obviously some other cool announcements during the event. So, yeah, I think it was certainly interesting this year. There's some, yeah.
I have to admit, like, it felt at the time like there was less than previous years, but going back and looking at the list after the fact, and I think it's more just the fact that there was more announced outside of the big keynotes than there have been in previous years. Like, you think about Monday Night Live, like, they announced a lot of stuff on the Monday, which they haven't typically done in years past. The opening keynote was a little light on announcements compared to previous years, but the rest of Tuesday they had a whole bunch of stuff. As for Wednesday, data and ML, right? Like, that's, Tuesday afternoon, all day Wednesday, that's just data ML time. And man, were there a lot of SageMaker and, Glue and all of those sorts of things. I think it's a nice mix. There's some really interesting dev tools. There's some really lots of data, lots of ML. So a number of quality of life. Few things I was kind of hoping for that didn't materialize. So I guess that's just me going back and harassing my account manager in the new year. That's fine. We can do that. But yeah, some really interesting things that, as with all AWS announcements, lots and lots and lots and lots of stuff that's not in Sydney. In fact, the 6 core regions, oh man, did they get some love? Everybody else is maybe in the future. And it wouldn't be an AWS announcement if that didn't hold true.
Yes. And bit sad that still no announcement from Melbourne.
Yep. That is an unfortunate event.
It just means that my customers can't harass me for it before Christmas. That's fine.
It's not a bad one. Yeah.
Yeah, ever the optimist.
I did have several people reach out to me because they thought there wasn't a lot announced at reInvent. So that was an interesting tidbit. But then when I did a bit of a small poll in the Slack of the user group, everybody had a different favorite announcement. So clearly there was still a lot of different perspectives on, hey, this is cool stuff.
I don't think there was as much new stuff, like new services, as there have been in previous years. There was lots and lots of new features to existing services and products, but it did feel, and maybe that's what was tickling my brain, that there weren't a lot of new product, new service. I think off the top of my head, there was probably only about 6 or 7 all week, which, sure, okay, that probably sounds a little light on, but you look at the total number, you look at the what's new, feed, or you look at the news blog, and yeah, it's clear that it was a busy week.
Yeah, I took a snapshot of just what was in the what's new and what was in the main blog, and there were 182 items there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go.
For 1 week.
For 1 week, or what is effectively, 5 days or 6 days. It's a pretty busy week.
Yep, definitely. But also, too, it's interesting. I could probably put a small list of things that I missed that I was hoping for as well that expected. So yeah, as I say, need to go and talk to some people. It's like, hey, when is this coming?
Yeah. When am I getting centrally managed Route 53?
Ooh, yeah. In general, they seem to be pushing a lot more sort of centrally managed things out. So hopefully not too.
Yeah. Delegated admins for AWS orgs, centralized backup. Like, we're getting there. Like, we're getting some quality of life.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the backup, though, it's interesting some of the announcements that came out about backup, but not the one that I was really sort of
hoping for. You can back up your cloud formation?
Well, actually, so that's an interesting. That was sort of like my number 11 out of my top 10, because it's not, you don't actually back up your cloud formation. You can back up everything that's in your cloud formation stack together at the same time. Maybe interesting, although if you're using pipelines and you separate all your resources out in your pipelines, then that doesn't help. I started reading, it's like, oh, that sounds interesting. Yeah, cool. We can back everything up. So all these resources are backed up at the same time. It's like, oh, hang on, wait. If I'm pushing them out in my pipeline and the resources aren't in the same CloudFormation template, or, I'm reusing the same template with just different parameters in my pipeline.
Yeah, I've got to tightly couple my infrastructure. That feels counterintuitive.
It does. I was like, So that was why it was my number 11. It's like, this sounds good, but
there's a catch.
Exactly. I was waiting for the EBS snapshot archiving. They've got that on EBS snapshot. They've got it on DLM. It's not in AWS backup. That was my one that I was hoping for it here, but we'll see. Hopefully soon.
One day.
It's in DLM. Come on.
But as we've already started talking about the actual announcements, shall we just dive into that part then?
Dive into our favourites?
Yeah.
I'll go first, because I've got one that was my favourite, but is now maybe not my favourite, because I've actually had a chance to play with it. As is always the case. It sounds good, and then you go, hang on a minute, that's not quite so good. Step Functions Distributed Map. This one was announced in Werner's keynote on Thursday. Basically gives you the ability to run large-scale parallel data processing in your step function. The problem with step functions until now is, well, let's back up. You can run map processes in step functions, which allows you to run parallel compute jobs across disparate data sets. So you can have, say, 10 items in an invoice, and you can fire off a separate Lambda or a separate task for each of those line items in parallel. Very cool. Allows you to do a huge amount of compute in a very short period of time. Very, very nice. The problem is that you, with step functions, have a 256 KB payload limit, which means you can only run so many compute jobs in parallel before the payload is the payload limit is too small. So there is a pretty hard limit unless you can trigger individual Lambda functions using like a byte of payload, which a little prohibitive when you're talking JSON payloads. Distributed map allows you to pull data in from S3 as either a single large file or multiple small files. So you can say, for each file in this S3 bucket, fire a Lambda function. And that allows you to work around the 256K payload limit. Now, this is super cool for me because I've been working on a side project which requires me to fire tens of thousands of Lambda functions in parallel. And I had to work around the issue by using SQS queues and checks, which is a little bit problematic when it comes to step functions because you've got to query how many messages are in the queue and all of that, and distributed map just gets rid of it completely. Super cool, fantastic. Except when you go to use it, you will notice that Visual Studio Code and the step function language schema has not been updated yet. So you don't actually have the language to use distributed map, so Visual Studio Code will give you syntax errors all the time. If you somehow manage to work around that and actually deploy the code, you will realize that in order for distributed map to work, the step function needs permission, needs IAM permission to start execution on itself, which, if you're declaring step functions in a CloudFormation template, becomes a little problematic because you can't have it reference itself. So the little bit of an issue. So you end up having to use a wildcard because we like wildcards in IAM policies, and then wrapping it in like a boundary or something like that. So the good thing is it works and it is stupid fast. And if you have a workload that needs to run multiple of these, distributed map looks like a very, very simple drop-in. Like literally, from a code perspective, rather than literally the only code change I needed to make was rather than output in batches of 10 to SQS queue, write to CSV and upload to S3 bucket. That was and then just change the step function config to pull from bucket instead of query queue. And, I had the code change done in about 30-40 minutes. Added another 30-40 minutes to work around all the other issues, but sort of less than 2 hours, and I had the whole thing out and replaced. Super cool, super awesome. It does cost more than doing it the SQS way. SQS, obviously, very, very cheap to throw messages in there. Distributed map, you're paying for each individual call on a step function, which is, significantly more expensive, but it's still only 2.5 cents per 1,000. So, even at 100,000, you're still only talking like a couple of bucks. So, if you got the right type of use case, super cool. However, my advice would be hang off until they solve a couple of these quality of life issues with it. Namely, get the VS Code and the schema files up to date, which, looking at the updates on GitLab, will happen, in the coming days if it hasn't already.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that always takes a bit of time because they don't want to spoil things.
You can't update the schema ahead of the announcement. But how fast? The fast follow thing becomes a little problematic when, as we said, 180 announcements in 5 days. It's a little hard to keep a distributed set of GitHub projects all up to date.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that one at least is something that will solve itself soon enough.
That'll be fixed. That'll be fixed soon enough. I will be interested to see what the solve or the workaround, the recommended workaround is for the IAM issue. I am sure that's one of those things that as soon as they get to updating all of that sort of stuff, they'll have a pattern that you can literally just drop in and deploy it like this, set this boundary, and you're off to the races kind of thing. It's just I was writing up a blog for this today. It's just one of those things when it was announced on Thursday. I was coding it on Saturday. Yeah, this is what happens when you live on the bleeding edge, right? You find the edge cases. You find the edge.
Exactly. Because it's often enough that you can see like IAM permissions and all that stuff getting released before an announcement, but they can't do that for reInvent.
No, that was my favorite. Mainly just because I had a pressing use case for it. So I'm like, score! I was kind of hoping you... I literally actually went to bed on the Wednesday night, thinking about how I could make this whole SQS thing better, and then woke up Thursday morning to Werner going, here's a solution to your problem. And I'm like, you see? That's what I like about AWS.
I'm going to jump in and give it top two. My top one was reasonably pre-invent, but so awesome I think it needs another announcement. The IAM support for multiple MFA devices, especially for the root user. I mean,
Nice, yeah.
Just how many times have you either gone, well, we can't put an MFA on root because, we've got a team that's looking after that, and who gets it, and if we're distributed, how do we do that? Now, you can put up to 8 MFAs on, so awesome. No excuse for not putting MFA on root accounts anymore. Just super cool. So, but that was my quick, I needed to just say that again because super awesome. And my sort of number two is a bit of a quality of life improvement and just pre-invent. Is cross-account access for the reachability analyzer. I love reachability analyzer for any time, things aren't talking to each other properly and you need to work out, where is it not, where is it breaking? And previously that had just been within your account, but now cross-account within your organization. So do need to enable trusted access for reachability analyzer in your org. But then it's just yes, this account, this device in this account needs to talk to this RDS in this other account, and it's not, where is it breaking? And run your trace, and yes. So that's cool. It's one of those things that I, use a fair bit if things are breaking, and it's now super nice to have it cross account.
I had completely missed that announcement. So I'm curious, does it then now show it breaks because it doesn't have a route in Transit Gateway and things like that? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I've not had a chance to play with it a whole lot, but it's from reading up that should be able to check all the route issues and gateways and things like that. So
because that sounds like something I have desperately wanted at various points.
Yeah, it's it's not a huge announcement until you need it. When you need it, it's God, I wish I had that. And now you do. So that's I was super happy when I heard that. As you said, not a big announcement. I mean, you missed it, Arjen, but it's one of those things that it can just be so helpful.
Nice. I guess it's my turn then. So I don't know if I'd call it my favorite, but one that I really liked was AWS Verified Access. It's in preview, but it's in preview in a way that it actually works in Sydney, which is amazing by itself. So what is this? AWS Verified Access is basically AWS's implementation of zero trust networking. So traditionally, if you want to access the services in a VPC that are not publicly available, you would need to use a VPN or something like it to get access to them, which has its whole bunch of downsides, not the least that you need to maintain it. It's extra stuff that you have to think about. You usually can't be very fine-grained in who you give access to, all that sort of thing. And so zero trust networking came up in the past few years, really, that it gained more traction. The one that I often run into is the solution from Cloudflare. But the verified access that AWS announced is basically it allows you to set up endpoints that you can call, and then it verifies against either your AWS IAM
Identity Center. Yep, that's the one. But using their SSO part, or any OIDC, OpenID Connect provider. So this seems really cool. I did try to play with it a bit, just
met and I ran into some things I did not expect. So the idea, in my opinion, was that you can use this to set these endpoints from whatever account you're running, but I couldn't get it to work with the SSO in a random account. I could get it working in a delegated admin account for SSO, which is a requirement that you set up, but not in the account itself, which is a bit of a shame because in my view, the way this would work is that you'd literally set it up as part of your application stack, get the endpoint out, especially in like dev environments. Maybe in production environments, you want more centralized solutions, but still, aside from that, it seems to work quite nice. So I'm looking forward to actually being able to play with it a bit more once it's out of preview, because I wouldn't recommend anybody to use it for the production until it is out of preview.
Good advice.
Yeah, I have to admit, this one's got me. There's a couple of use cases that I can see for this one. I looked at the pricing and it's not prohibitively expensive.
But it's also far from cheap.
Yeah, it's also far from cheap. Like, if you've got a handful of applications, yeah, okay, cool. But like, I did some back of the napkin math and it's like, okay, 20 apps running for the whole month is like a little over $4,000, and it's like, that's not cheap. But look, it's 20 apps running for the whole month, and you know, if you've got that sort of workload, you know, what are you doing with it? But it's kind of like, yeah, okay. So it's one of these things that looks very interesting, and I can think of some good use cases, but it's like, you'd really want to need that level of security and control in order to warrant the additional price.
Yeah.
But, you know, this is becoming more and more important and more of a necessity, so, you know.
Yeah, especially in the security landscape in Australia at the moment. A VPN is still a big risk to have running.
Yeah, no, agreed. Does that mean we're back to me, or?
Yes, I think so.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to continue on the security choo-choo train. Security Lake. This is one of these, I don't know, if you're the right type of person, I guess you'd find this exciting. You know, security people are strange people. This is definitely a big quality of life thing. With the general consensus being want to move, if you haven't already, to multi-account, heavily leverage organizations and, you know, blast radius protection and all of that sort of stuff. It is becoming more and more critical to have these centrally controlled, centrally managed areas for your various pieces of the observability puzzle. You know, we can go into other conversations later around some of the stuff that was announced around CloudWatch, but a purpose-built, customer-owned data lake dedicated for security as a point-and-click, yes, please.
And in Sydney.
Like, you know, whoo! One of the jump for joys. Yes, it's in preview, but I tell you what, like, I would be, if I was deploying, if I had a small environment or I was looking at deploying a landing zone in the imminent future, I would be stopping and going and taking a good hard this now, because I think from just a visibility and compliance and confidence in the health and security of your environment, this is a huge win. As I say, not the most exciting announcement. Not something that makes me go, oh, I've got to go back to my hotel room and play with that right now. Deep Racer. But, you know, like, it's just one of those things that's just going to make people's lives easier, and make customers' environments more secure. And, you know, that's a win.
Yeah, and that was definitely on my list as well. You know, funnily enough, the announcement came out as I was, you know, just after I was doing some security stuff with one of my customers. I'm just like, I saw it and I was like, copied and pasted, put the blurb in, sent him an email. It's like, what do you think of this? It's like, oh, yes. Tell me more. So yeah, it's, you know, it's like, it's those quality of life thing. It's like, yes, cool, let's get a data lake, and it's got all the security bits sort of sorted for you. So, you don't have to go and try and, make your own security-focused data lake. It's there. They're doing a lot of the undifferentiated heavy lifting for you. Put all the bits in. So yeah, it sounds like pretty good. And so the security guy I was dealing with was like, yes, tell me more. So yeah, I think I'll be looking into that in the not too distant future. So many projects right now.
So many things to play with.
Yes. But on my side of things, my next one, which I think is very cool, the RDS blue-green. That sounds quite interesting. So yeah, obviously I've not really haven't had a chance to play with this, but yeah, looking through it actually looks pretty cool how it gets deployed as well. And the from the blog, just seeing the pictures, it looks super easy to create. It automatically keeps your green environment updated, and in the console even maps out like little tags next to your blue databases and replicas, like blue, and then green. So you know where things at, and then once you've done your testing, you flick a little switch to switch over, and hey, green now becomes your production, and the production gets orphaned and left there. So they purposely do not clean up the old production. So make sure if you definitely do not need it anymore, when you're happy, delete those resources. But yeah, it sounds like it's a quick and easy way to do blue-green on your MySQL and MariaDB databases. So interesting thing was like both the Aurora MySQL and the RDS MySQL and MariaDB.
Yeah, but MariaDB in the end is still just MySQL under a different name.
Yeah, so all your MySQL of whatever form. Yeah.
No, it's certainly cool. Unless I'm mistaken, it doesn't have any possibilities yet around doing it through CloudFormation or things like that.
Yeah, it seems to be mostly click work. I think there was some CLI bits, but yeah, it looked mostly click. I said I've not done, hadn't really had much of a chance to look deeply into this one. When we went, hey, that sounds cool. Let's have a read through the blog and see where we can use it.
Yeah,
mostly on my side of things, people are using Postgres or something else, so they're not using the MySQL. But
yep, for everybody running a WordPress server, perfect.
Yeah, yeah. So hopefully that'll get extended out, to others if can. Yeah, looks interesting.
Yeah. No, I really like this one as well. And then it's of course connected as well with the, I don't know, about a month ago that CloudFront Blue-Green came out. Yeah.
That was sort of semi-early pre-invent. I think similar time to that, the multi-MFA devices. So they're sort of pushing some of those blue-green, make life easier.
We can almost blue-green an entire environment.
I know some people that would be very happy with that.
Next year at reInvent, it's blue-green accounts.
Yeah.
Yes. We'll rock up there to get our reInvent jacket. It's like, do you want the blue one or the green one?
No, you just flip. You just turn them inside out. See, that is a swag idea. AWS, you can contact me. I'm more than happy to sell you the license for that idea. Blue-green reversible jackets.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
I guess it's my turn again. One that I found quite cool, and this is 100% a ClickOps tool because it's the AWS Application Composer. What this is basically it allows you to design your serverless applications. So you click together what you want, what it needs to do, and you basically sort of press a button or it gets automatically generated, and you have your SAM CloudFormation template for it. So you just use a visual drag and drop to connect everything together the way you want it, and you don't have to do the actual writing of your code, but you have it as code. And that is just really cool, especially for proof of concept applications, quickly getting something up and running, or at least be able to discuss with other people, hey, this is my idea, this is how it will work, what it looks like. You've got your diagrams, your code, everything in one go. It seems really nice to me.
Oh, like, to me, this is a killer, as you said, like POC, MVP, rapid spike, dream. Like, the ability to just jump in, go boom, 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 this is what I want, this is what I need it to do. Test, no, not quite, pull this in, yep, cool, got it. And then to be able to then go and now give me the code that I can then, take into, productionize. Sure, you're going to need to carve it up, and the code's not going to be as clean as you could have written. But, we mentioned before, the undifferentiated heavy lifting. Having the code there, that's 70, 80% of the work right off the bat, where you can just go, right, I'll move this, cut that. That's way simpler than starting from scratch. It's always been a bugbear of mine, proof of concept. You either invest the time writing the code and doing it properly to make life easier in the long term, and you suffer the speed cost, or, you do it click ops and have to reinvent the wheel after the fact. This gives you the best of both worlds. What would be, there are some nifty things that they could probably do to this long term to make it even better around, if you can do a POC now, or you can pull some code in later and then iterate on it. There's probably some really cool things to lower the bar to have other people iterate and test and validate ideas, which would be really, really cool. But yeah, I've been meaning to play with this one, but there's just too many things that are on my I want to play with that list.
You can actually import existing.
Oh, I didn't realize that was that was already a thing. I did not realize that was a thing. Okay, well now I'm even happier. So I'm now going to go and find the weirdest, craziest, backwards hacked piece of code I've got and throw that in and see what happens.
Yeah, because me personally, I'm a visual person. I like to make sure that I have architecture diagrams, I have network diagrams, and now this will diagram for you as well. So yeah, either in the forwards going where you click in and put the code pieces together and get it to generate, or they just say get your existing, pull it in, and hey, your code's diagrammed as well. So yeah, sounds very cool.
CloudFormer 2.0 or CloudFormer 3.0?
3.0, 2.0 is basically Ian's version.
Ian's version, yeah. I was going to say. So yeah, 3.0.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, in that regard, though, the one of the first things I expect that they will improve on is the output, that it will not just be CloudFormation, but it will also be CDK style code.
Yep. That feels like a pretty logical next step. Back to me. Okay, so next on my fun list, I'm gonna skip that one and move to another. I'll pick that one. Same line as my security lake. CloudWatch launches cross-account observability across multiple AWS accounts.
That was going to be my next one.
This was sorely missing. This has always been a bugbear of mine. Again, it's we're doing patterns where we're using multi accounts, we're distributing our workloads, but observability gets lost in the mix. And there's a lot of great tools, third-party tools, to solve this problem. There have been some things you could build within AWS, and you could export log groups, and you could use Event Bridge and a bunch of other bits and pieces to get this to happen. But again, we as cloud engineers, as cloud consultants, shouldn't be having to build the product to get to work around the fact that a feature of multi-account isn't the fact that you can see everything. So the fact that this is now available super, super cool. This, again, is going to be one of those things that organizations should be going back and revisiting their solution, because if you're at all supportive of, leveraging managed services where possible, you probably want to be ripping out that old custom-made solution and replacing it with this one.
Yeah, and the interesting thing I found as well there is you can have multiple monitoring accounts as well. So, for that, multi-account strategy with different departments and so forth, you can say, hey, I'm going to create a monitor here with just the source as the accounts that this department owns, and they can see a cross-account view of their accounts, and then another one for, your ops team that's looking after everything, and give me the source of all the account. So I thought that was sort of an interesting take as well. It's not just, hey, here's your monitor and all the sources. It's, you can have multiple monitors and different sources for those monitors as well. So yeah, you can sort of still delegate that across teams and business units and only see what they need to see.
Yeah. So not a particularly exciting one. But definitely one that's going to make life easier, and that seems to be a trend of this year. Is, as we sort of alluded to before, there weren't a whole heap of new product announcements, but there were lots and lots of that's just going to make life a little bit easier. And this was definitely one of them.
Yeah.
Plus, observability is sort of a passion area of mine, so anything that helps customers get a better understanding of what it is that their environment's doing, or more importantly, what allows me to work out why I'm getting a weird transaction on my bill in my personal account because I left something on and now I can't find it, is a good thing.
Yeah, definitely. And along with observability, one that sort of piqued my interest was Network Manager has real-time performance monitoring. So you can set up performance monitors between regions, between AZs and intra-AZ. So you just go into the Network Manager console, select infrastructure performance, and you can put in some queries to sort of find out what's the latency between your AZs, what's the speed between your regions. So it's one of those sort of interesting little, not sure how often you'd be using it, but it seemed one of those interesting little things that came up. While it is mostly ClickOps, there is a CLI option as well. So if you know sort of what you're looking for, you can chuck a CLI down and get some stats between the regions.
Nice. Well, if we're talking about network speed and stuff, one thing I found interesting itself, not an announcement, but a couple of small announcements were related to it. That was from the Monday Night Live keynote, where they went under the hood and were talking about a new way of networking within the AWS networking, the AWS underlying network, which is using scalable, reliable diagram, or SRD, which is basically a way of multipathing through a network, much faster, way faster retries, everything, and it's all reliant on the Nitro stuff that they've got under the hood, which really suggests just watching that part of the keynote just to get a better idea of what it really means, because I can't really do it justice.
Yeah, it was quite interesting.
Yeah, but a couple of the announcements that were tied to that are very nice as well. Big one is with all new EBS IO2 volumes. This is coming early next year, but they will be switching to SRD, and that means they have like 90% lower latency, which is a very big win, especially if you're already using IO2, which is necessary for getting that performance up. If that then just goes a lot higher, because it's not just lower latency, it's also higher throughput. So that's really cool. And the other one then is ENA Express, which is basically, I'm not quite sure why they do it this way, but you need to enable it for your regular ENAs, and there's no extra cost, anything, just like with the IO2 volumes, there's no extra cost related to this, but with ENA Express, you do need to enable it, and you'll get higher throughput, lower latency, and all that stuff. Unfortunately, it's very limited right now with just C6GN 16x large instances. Yeah, I know the naming of the instances is still basically the compute and network optimized Graviton instances, but then the 16 extra large size. But this can boost just the throughput limits way higher. So I think it went basically from 5 gigabyte per second to 25. So that's quite a bit.
Yeah. And as you say, it's definitely worth going back and having a look at the Monday Night Live, where Pete's talking about that, because, yeah, he was also showing sort of graphs of tail off and, in the old methods, and, how it's sort of pretty just, static with the new. So yeah, it was quite interesting seeing that. So
back to me. What else is on my list? Right, I'm gonna do delegated administrator for AWS organizations. So I'm gonna just continue down my multi-account organization path. Yay. Okay. You have the ability to not have to log in to your, what do we call it nowadays? Management account, master biller account, administrator account. Yeah, pick a term for it. Yay. All right. This is, and I know I've said this for the last couple. This is going to require people to go back and rethink the design of their landing zone, the design of their organization. But basically, at a high level, this gives you the ability to define individual delegated administrator accounts for specific groups of accounts within your organization. So you could have a delegated administrator account for your finance OU. You could have another one for your HR OU, and you could break out individual administrator accounts for each of your different lines of business, departments, organizational groups, whatever you want, and then give each of those the ability to manage the backup policies, the service control policies, your AI service opt-out policies. All of those sorts of things that you used to have to do from the management account at an org level, you can now do at a much more granular level, tightly controlled to a particular scope. So, this is going to give people a lot more flexibility and a lot more customizability to their security posture. So, big win. Again, as I've said with the last couple, not something that, you're going to run out and do to your environment because it's super exciting, but something you absolutely should be doing because of the potential increasing control and governance that it's going to give you.
Yep.
Yeah. No, I really, at first, when I saw the announcement, I thought it's just yet another delegated admin, which was already nice, but it's definitely not something to be excited about. But then, as you mentioned, you get the multiple accounts the nested thing that really makes this a big item for me.
Yeah. So continuing down the sort of security side of things, so this is another preview one, not in Sydney, not overly sexy, but it's definitely what I thought was interesting. RDS protection with guard duty. So, it's Aurora only at the moment, but looking to, add detection for suspicious logins to your databases. Well, so long as your databases are Aurora. But yeah, just, one of those extra nice, guard duty does its thing quite well. Adding Aurora into one of the things that it protects, nice. It's, as it says, in preview, so, and not in Sydney, but yeah, we'll just see. It does support organizations guard duty, so you just, turn it on in your delegated admin account, and it'll push it out for your Auroras everywhere. So something that I thought was nice and just always good to add more stuff into Guard Duty.
Yep. I'll just keep with the security theme of this round. I'm just thinking which one. There's two in my mind. But I will go for verified permissions. This actually has some overlap with the verified access I mentioned earlier, in the way it works under the hood. Basically, verified permissions is a way to, what I said about verified access with the whole zero trust thing, where you then have basically a way to access your applications, and it does the login and stuff for you. With verified permissions, you basically hook that same kind of permission structure into your applications themselves. So you don't need to build, if this is for internal applications, you don't need to build your own integration with your SSO systems or things like that. You hook it into the same way you would do verified access. You hook it into your SSO, or of course you hook it into any OpenID Connect provider, so you can do it for external applications as well. But this uses the same policy language as well as that verified access does. I didn't go into that earlier, but it's called CEDAR, and it's basically just a way to define how and who gets access to the applications then in this case. So I haven't had a chance to play with this. I don't have any side projects that use authentication. So most of it is CLI stuff or just hooks into AWS directly. But this is really nice in that regard, and I am looking forward to playing around with it a bit.
Yeah. Back to me. What else? All right, I'm gonna pick the big one, the potentially contentious, highly opinionated one, Code Catalyst. Yeah. So it's on my top list. But it's on my top list with a few caveats. So for those of you who, have no idea what I'm talking about, Code Catalyst is a unified software development service that makes it faster to build and deliver software on AWS. It's basically it is an what I would call opinionated deployment and CI/CD pipeline solution. So it's kind of a little bit different in that it requires some additional setups like what is it? Is it the Amazon Builder ID? Oh, AWS Builder ID, I think it actually is, from memory. And basically it gives you a way to scaffold your new projects, scaffold your deployment pipelines, configuration into the various AWS accounts that you wanted to be deploying your workload in, and enables you to set up all of the core components you'll need in order to do and enable best practice sort of development and deployment practices. It is not something I would expect existing AWS users or existing organizations to adopt in waves. I think if you already have an existing CI/CD tool chain or an existing, deployment process or anything like that, you're probably not going to be running out to go and replace it with this. Haven't had a chance to really stretch its legs, but if we've learnt one thing from AWS around the way they do developer tools, they do it in a highly opinionated kind of manner, which doesn't necessarily give you the same flexibility that your build kites and your Jenkins and your Travises of the world might give you. But for those customers starting out, and let's not forget, we live in AWS all day, every day, but, there are still lots and lots of organizations who haven't started their cloud adoption journey yet, or lots of organizations where software development and deployment and DevOps are not part of their bread and butter. Something like this could be really useful for them. It looks like, based on the rough play that I've had with it thus far, that it tries to abstract away a bit of this whole how do I do multi-account deployments and how do I get visibility of my deployment process back into my source code, and how do I control all of these things, and it's not going to be, something that your big Fortune 500s are probably going to pick up. They've already got tools to do this. But as a getting started, as a what should we put here for a greenfields, this might be a fairly interesting starting point. And I think the paid version is like $4 a user, and for that you get a few thousand build minutes a month and a bunch of other bits and pieces. It's a good, potentially a good starting point. And again, one of those things that I'm sort of going to need to attack with a little bit more vigor to sort of form a stronger opinion about it.
Yeah, there's also a lot more to it than just the CI/CD.
Oh, it is a whole package of services, which is really interesting.
Yeah, the really seems a bit like they've tried to put the whole developer experience into
a single box.
Yeah, so it has things like your Kanban boards, or this basically what they call a dev file, which is similar to what you might be used to from your programming languages, that defines how your stack is built and which versions of things need to be run and all those things. And you can import those into your Cloud9 or Visual Studio Code, and it adjusts it all.
It's IDE integration, it's task management, it's issue tracking, it's deployments, it's the whole kit and caboodle sort of wrapped up into one nice little bit. And as I say, right, like how well does it integrate with other tools? And it says it integrates with things like GitHub and all that sort of stuff. How good does it integrate? What are the limitations and those sorts of things? If you're talking about, issue tracking and all of that sort of stuff, well, most organizations would have an Atlassian, like a Jira, tenant or something like that already. What are the integrations like with that? And, all of those sorts of things. So there's a lot of questions here. But as I say, like just the depth, at least the breadth of features that this thing has had. If you're, starting a dev team, or, dev is not your primary focus as an organization, but you want somewhere to start, this is potentially a good option. Hashtag, asterisk, further validation required. Come back and talk to me in January. Oh, well, no, I won't be at the user group in January. Come and talk to me at the user group in February, and I will give you the follow-up opinion as to just how good this is. But I see a lot of potential, as I say, for the right type of customer.
I was just going to say it's quite interesting. I sort of had missed that one, but yeah, I can see some customers where it might be interesting.
Yeah. Just an out of the box, nice thing.
And if they're in AWS, it's fine if it's opinionated towards AWS.
Well, yeah.
It's definitely also ambitious in trying to do all the things at once.
It's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it reminds me in some ways a bit of another product that tried to do that.
Oh, don't say it. I know where you're going here.
Everybody loves CodeStar, right? And remembers that it exists.
Yeah.
Yes. At least it's not in the exams anymore, or I've not come across it.
Yeah, this would not be the first time they have attempted this. It looks like they have taken the learnings, shall we say, from CodeStar and sort of had a little bit of a look at what the industry's doing, and dare I say it, they're a little bit wiser now. So hopefully this is a better approach.
Yeah, it feels a bit like a CodeStar 2.0, but they thought the brand of CodeStar was, well, so terrible that they decided to just
start over.
Yeah.
CodeStar for me was always a bit of we need something but don't want to build a product, so how do we tie the other developer tools together and just say that's it. Whereas this appears to be a what is it the customer actually needs, and let's gear something up for them. So, time will tell. Because the other question here is developer tools and the developer experience is constantly changing. If there's one thing developers are good at doing, it's inventing new frameworks and changing the way we do things. AWS is no stranger to rapid development and new feature releases and all of that. How much love this gets will be something I'll be keeping a close eye on.
Cool. Sort of getting back to the security type thing. Isn't really something that I've got a need for in my direct customers, but maybe in some of the others. Data protection for CloudWatch logs. So if you're dealing with PII data, this lets you sort of set a policy to mask out that PII information in your in CloudWatch logs. So it looks to be relatively straightforward and has sort of a whole bunch of sort of filters already there. Sort of an extra tab on your in your log group details. You create a policy, and they were saying things like social security numbers, credit card details, email addresses, passwords, driver's licenses for various countries. Just click on that, sort of say these are the identifiers, and then it just sort of masks that data out of your out of the messages in your log events. And so just sort of looking at that, sending them downstream, that data is masked out, and there's still an option to unmask it with the appropriate IAM policy. So that's in Sydney. So just an interesting one if you're dealing with logs that may have PII and you don't want people to see that information in the log. Looks like it's fairly straightforward way to mask that out.
Cool. Well, I'm just going to pick the other security one that I was debating for the last round, and that is proactive rules for AWS config. So basically, what this means is, let's assume we're all familiar with AWS config. AWS config, or let's not assume that. AWS config allows you to check your resources if they comply to certain standards or things that you've set up that it needs to check. Simple thing. It can be something as simple as an EC2 instance needs to have its EBS volume encrypted, that kind of thing. With proactive rules, what you can do is run this before it actually gets deployed. So it will check that the config of the EC2 instance that you send to it has an encrypted EBS volume. So you may have noticed by the way I said it, you have to send that data to AWS config. It doesn't just automatically do it based on, hey, an EC2 instance is getting spun up. Let me quickly verify that it does everything before people press the submit button. So you have to tie it into your CI/CD pipeline or however you handle your deployment, which hopefully is with something like a CI/CD pipeline. You have to use an API call then, or you can use CloudFormation Guard to trigger basically AWS config to run the verification. So that makes it sound like, why would you go to the issue through the bother of using AWS config for that when you can just define it all in your pipeline? The big thing is that you just have to do a single rule that you send to AWS config, and if you then update AWS config at some point, it will apply all of those rules to all of your pipelines. So you have the centralized place that you would do it, and obviously you already use those same rules to verify that your existing resources comply with those same things. So I really like what you can do with this, and there's not much more to say about it. It is one of those quality of life things that Matt mentioned.
Yep. There was a fair few of those.
Hey, I'm happy to say quality of life improvements, right? Like at the end of the day, anything that makes life easier is a good thing.
Yep.
I'm going to pick Event Bridge pipes.
I was wondering when that one would come.
I just looked at it and I'm like, we haven't spoken about that yet. That was a pretty big thing. Event Bridge. That's been getting some serious love the last couple of months. It is really nice to see the capabilities that's now got. When they launched it, it was a little feature light, shall we say, when compared to some of the other options and those sorts of things. But with the work they've done, particularly the couple of weeks leading up to reInvent and again last week, EventBridge really is now the way to integrate services with each other. So for those of you who don't know or aren't familiar, EventBridge is a way to integrate. It was the replacement for, was it CloudWatch Events?
Yes.
Yeah. So EventBridge Pipes was announced last week and basically makes it easy for you to connect your various applications together. So you can take data coming out of things like SQS or Kinesis or your Dynamo table or MQ or any of those sorts of event based services, and you can then use EventBridge Pipes to send it out the other way to an SNS topic, or maybe you've got a Kinesis fire hose or other event buses or step functions or any of those sorts of endpoints that you might want to consume a particular resource or payload. The really nifty thing about it is that you can, much like you can with your Kinesis data streams, is that you can actually put in an optional filtering step to filter, enrich, transform the data in transit before it gets to the destination point. So you could potentially write yourself a Lambda function that gets given the data, it does a little bit of a transform and an enrichment, and then passes it back to the pipe, which will send it through to the endpoint. So really nice way. This opens up a lot of possibilities in the event-driven space where we can start, simplifying the moving of data from one point to another. Again, it's nothing that we haven't previously been able to build ourselves. But to be fair, that statement in and of itself is a little bit of a cop-out because we have Lambda functions, we have batch, we have Fargate. Yeah, we can program pretty much whatever we want nowadays. So saying, we could do this ourselves, well, yeah, we can do anything with enough time and money and resourcing. But this really opens up the possibilities now. So you could just, do some really simple things and, whenever you get some data coming into a Dynamo DP table, pipe that out to your EventBridge pipes, have it transform the data and then fire that through to, your Kinesis fire hose for, log archiving or your machine learning ingestion engine or any of those sorts of bits and pieces. So a lot of really cool things you could do with it. Got a lot of excitement last week, and is actually available in Sydney. So yeah. In fact, it's available in most regions. I'm not going to say all because I'm not actually sure at this point in time if I could list all of the regions anymore. But yeah, if you look at the official announcements page, you'll see that most of them are listed there.
Yeah, it's definitely a really nice improvement. And just, to reiterate what you said about EventBridge, it has had so many good improvements, not just in the past month or so, but in the past couple of years. If you haven't looked at it for a while, I really recommend having another look because there's so much you can do with it nowadays.
And then put a presentation together and come and present at the meetup.
Always looking for speakers.
There's the call to action. There's the call to action. Just slide it in there. Just slide. But no, I think you're right. Like, it has gotten so much love. It is probably due for a welcome to EventBridge sort of session, because I would dare say that most people, myself included, would not necessarily be aware of all of the features that EventBridge now has.
Yeah.
I gave that talk in Perth a month and a half ago. I had the user group there.
Hey, see, this is what happens.
But it hasn't been given in Melbourne.
Hasn't been given in Melbourne and didn't include pipes.
All right. Over to me. Sort of continuing along on the sort of PII security type thing. This will sort of come out as an announcement for a new feature, but really looking at it, it's more of a sort of an upgrade, rehash, automated data discovery for Amazon Macy. Basically what they're doing is sort of changing the way that Macy works. This is on by default for any new Macy customers and can be turned on for existing. It sort of looks like, they're taking some ML and some tuning bits and making it a bit cheaper and easier to get Macy running. They're using some of the ML to have a look at, which buckets shall I view, which ones have changed, where should I spend my time looking at type things. So, it sort of sounds like, although it's a feature that you can turn on, being on by default, I think they're sort of, it's more of a, this is how I think, we think Macy should run now, the better way for it. So, it's, interesting, and, sort of similar to, GuardDuty and Security Hub, turning those on, you get a free 30 days to have a look and see what is it going to do for you and how much is it going to cost. But it's, it looks like putting some ML smarts into the way that Macy has a look at your buckets and finds out what PII related data is in there. So just another one of those quality of life upgrades. Nothing super sexy with that one, but just a different way to do things. They're saying it should be cheaper than running full data scan on all of your buckets. We can save you a bit of money and do things a little bit smarter. If you need that, Macy for your data, looks like a good update to the way it does things.
Yep, I'll just go for a small quality of life announcement here as well. Another service we've mentioned several times, Amazon CloudWatch, but this is the Internet Monitor.
That's my last one.
Did I steal it from you?
That's all good.
I'm sorry. So, Internet Monitor is looking at your applications to monitor, but it monitors the whole part between the application and the end users. So, basically what this helps with is somebody complaining because somewhere between them and Amazon there's a connection issue. So you don't end up spending hours looking, hey, what's wrong with my application? You can immediately see, no, there is something wrong. Might not be at the user side, but somewhere in between that you don't have any control of. Or it will tell you what part of your stack might be. It's basically, it visualizes where issues and which providers are affected, things like that. So it helps you improve your end user's network experience, but it's not limited to the AWS side of things. And that is really nice because I'm sure we've all had those cases where it seems things don't work for somebody and all you can say is it works for me.
And some of the, looking at the blog post, that some of the graphs and visualizations, metrics that it gives look pretty interesting. So as you say, it'll show, hey, you're coming through this area and, we've noticed that this ISP is having some issues, things like that. So you configure monitors for either VPC, CloudFront, and Workspaces. So Workspaces is an interesting one. So, people are having issue connecting to their workspaces or stuff. You can see there, as well as, people coming in to your VPC or in through your CloudFront. What's happening on the other side of AWS. So, just add us in Sydney. Did I say that already? Right. Yeah. So, it looks like an interesting service if you've got web-facing things. Now you can not only, troubleshoot what's inside your AWS, but, you can see if it's something that's outside of AWS, save your time there trying to fix something that's not your remit, and you can sort of, give your users some feedback on like, hey, it looks like there's this issue over here. Could be interesting.
Cool. Do we want to do one last round?
You took my last round.
I've got one more. Lattice. VPC Lattice. Now this one really piqued my interest when it was announced because, and again, I feel like I've been complaining about this all night, but distributed services and networking don't typically go hand in hand particularly well. If I have 10 accounts and 10 workloads in those 10 accounts, that means I'm either doing some VPC sharing or I have a lot of networking infrastructure, a lot of VPCs, maybe, some kind of transit gateway. I've got NAT gateways, I've got load balancers and all of those sorts of, and that's not that's not a small expense, right? Like networking in AWS is, or can be, a pretty pricey affair. Particularly when you start thinking about the fact that, NAT gateways, well, I need at least 2 of those, and, a transit gateway, and that's going to be on 750 hours a month or 730 hours a month, or however you want to calculate what a month is. And the prices start adding up pretty quickly. When you're thinking about, really my workload is nothing more than, I was working on one the other day, I have to have a VPC because my Lambda function needs to talk to an EFS endpoint. So now I need a VPC and I need I need, NAT gateways and, a whole heap of network infrastructure just to be able to, have some storage. When you then have all of those in different accounts and you want them to start talking to each other, it gets a little pricey, but it also gets really complicated really quickly. And I think that's where the whole idea behind Lattice came in. The idea behind VPC Lattice is that it simplifies the whole notion of facilitating, securing, and monitoring communication between the various services. So you can define a policy for your traffic management and what services can access what other services, and then monitor the health of all of those in a nice, consistent, easy to manage way. Now, the bit that I haven't been able to flesh out just yet is just how easy and manageable a way that is. And I think when you're talking about service networks or service buses or anything like that, getting it to work with 2 or 3 services, typically not too hard. But how does it handle when you start talking to 40, 50, 100 services? How does it scale? What's the manageability of it like? And all of those sorts of things. Like, VPC sharing is great, but you can't share subnet tags across accounts, so it doesn't really scale particularly well. But from a technology, it works really well. I don't know where Lattice lands on that sort of thing, but it looks like a really, really nice way to simplify and provide a consistent approach to having, and it's networking, so it doesn't really care if it's a Lambda function or a Kubernetes container if you're crazy, or an EC2 instance if you're even crazier, or any of those sorts of services. It's just traffic to it, and sort of hopefully it makes it really easy to have and really simplifies the way to get all of those sorts of things talking to each other. It's not particularly expensive. I think it works out to be about $18 per service per month. So, if you've got the 20 service yardstick that I sort of mentioned before, you're sort of talking $300-400 a month. Not prohibitively expensive, but it is networking, so you're probably still going to need a lot of that underlying network infrastructure to provide outbound internet connectivity and all of those sorts of things. So it'd be interesting to see just how this lines up and how well it sort of provides the consistency. But hopefully, we'll get a bit of a deeper dive and be able to answer some of those questions. But there's a really good write-up on the AWS blog that goes into a lot of detail and sort of outlines how you can get it all set up and working fairly easily, or at least it looks fairly easy. A lot of screenshots. It seems to be fairly point and click at the moment. That's sort of my one concern.
Yeah, that's speaking of that. The more cross-account they're starting to be, the more I feel like they need to have a way of actually using the CLI to do cross-account things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yes, you can assume IAM roles in other accounts and things like that, but it doesn't really help or even have some way to deploy CloudFormation cross-account resources for things like this, because how do you tie things together otherwise?
And that's the thing, like a lot of these sorts of things aren't a single account.
Yeah.
Like we talk about multi-account, but like if I think about a workload, well, that workload's going to have it's going to have a dev account, it's going to have, maybe a UAT account, it's going to have a production account. You could even get more granular around where data is stored versus where compute is stored, and then you need some sort of service bus across that. Like an individual service could, be spread across, multiple AWS accounts. So at that point alone, the idea of assuming a role in a particular account doesn't really hold water. So absolutely 100% agree. I do not envy the engineers and the architects that are going to have to think about what IAM 2.0 looks like in that sort of world, because that's not an insignificant thing that we've just sort of suggested. But hey, it is what it is.
Yeah, and that was it from me. that was pulled out my top 11. I didn't get to say all 11 because people had some of those things, but it was, I think, just as a wrap up for me, like a lot of my things weren't the big flashies. I mean, the MySQL blue-green was a pretty big one, but a lot of things for me were the sort of quality of life and extending.
He said it.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. And especially coming from more of an ops focus on things, those, anything that can make it easier, quicker to, detect issues, fix things, get our customers back and working again, observability things, all those sorts of things are, were really cool. Like, not the big sexy, oh, hey, new feature, push out, but there were a lot of those, how can we make life better for our ops people type thing, which, I quite like.
Yeah, cool. I'll just throw one more in there. I can tell this is something that in the current state I am unlikely to ever use, but it is Lambda Snapstart, which is the new optimization step that you can put into your Lambda functions, where once you deploy it or upload basically your Lambda file, your Lambda code, it will run an optimization process to make the startup speeds of the Lambda functions a lot faster. It says things like 10 times. Some of the partner links at the bottom of the blog post mention 13 to 15 times. It all looks technically very impressive and a great improvement. The reason I'm unlikely to use it anytime soon is it's Java only.
Yeah.
Or specifically Corretto only. So once it becomes available for other languages, which admittedly don't need it as much because, there are better languages.
Maybe you can get Scott on.
So he can compare it to his .NET optimizations.
That's okay. That's okay. I was waiting for him to say there are other languages that are faster, and we could have a conversation about Python being considered a faster language.
But, sorry, little inside joke there, folks.
It's no. This is one of those things that I'm with you on this one. It's can't write Java to save myself. I can write Python well enough to get myself into trouble, but it is a good sign. It makes me optimistic for the things that are coming in the Lambda world. Obviously, like Java is the backbone. That's always going to get the Corretto is going to get the nice shiny first, and that's fine. You got to start somewhere. if it comes to Python, if it comes to .NET, or when it comes and, Go and all the others, great, fantastic, excellent, because faster is more often than not better, and, smaller startup, like cold starts and all of that sort of thing, better. They are by no means the problem that they were, back in, 2017, 2018, but I'm never going to shy away from, faster start time. And 10x is crazy.
Yeah.
They are phenomenal numbers. So, yeah, very optimistic or very hopeful for things yet to come in the whole Lambda space. Still haven't gotten around to running containers as a Lambda and, all of those sorts of things, but I'd hate to think whether or not you'd be able to optimize that one, but that's a whole another conversation for another day.
You can optimize it.
Yeah.
You just take it out of the container.
Take it out of the container, yeah. I never got the idea of running containers as a Lambda function, but that's okay.
It's very specific use cases when you literally can't run it
any other way.
Well,
that's all right. Like we could have conversations here around, very specific use cases like, Textract being able to do, loan application analysis if you want, specific use cases for announcements. Yeah, tell me that wasn't done for, a particular vertical, but no. As we said before, there were 180 announcements, and, we've spoken about like 24 of them, I think. Huge amounts of stuff in the data space, a bunch of IoT announcements, things like Service Connect in ECS. There was Glue 4.0, which we, didn't get a chance to talk about, and a bunch of other, different bits and pieces. I think it's reInvent. There's always to talk about.
So with that, I think we'll be wrapping this up. If we missed anything that you think is more important than anything that we talked about, feel free to reach out to us on the user group Slack. It's probably the best place to get that. If you're not on the Slack yet, I go to melb.awsug.org.au/Slack and you can get your invite there. And then I will also, of course, thank the user group sponsors, which is our gold sponsor, CMD Solutions, and our silver sponsors, CIFO and Versant. These were the sponsors for 2022, but also for 2023. So it's great to have them all stick around. And of course, I want to thank these lovely people who joined me here tonight. Matt Merrill.
Woo!
Thank you, Matt. And thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Arjen, for hosting.
Always fun. And episode 1, season 2. Woo! We promise it won't be as big a gap between this one and the next one as it was between this one and the last one.
Yes, that's the whole idea of season 2. We'll aim to do better. And thank you all for listening, and hopefully you'll join us for the next one. Thank you, and bye.
See you.